Happy Sunday. I'm Reverend Kathy McCall, minister at Unity North Spiritual Center in Coon Rapids, Minnesota. So welcome to our Sunday lesson today on October 11th, 2020. If you're new with us, know that Unity North is part of a greater worldwide unity movement. We are the publishers of the Daily Word magazine. And we've been holding 130 years of prayer vigil through Silent Unity, the prayer ministry of the Unity movement. So if you need to call prayer support, you can call Silent Unity. The number is 1-800-669-7729, or that's 1-800-NOW-PRAY. And they'll pray with you 24 hours a day. So here at Unity North, we've had some great events lately, a Matthew Fox virtual event, and I've been hearing feedback from some of you. I appreciate hearing how you liked it and how you felt about it, and we've had some wonderful response. And also I want to thank Chris Italiano, Anne Mongeau, and Darlinda Alexander for their special support, Charlotte Fournier for creating the flyer with initial help from Gary Gagnes. So thank you all for everything you did for that event. And for all of you who participated, we deeply appreciate it. Next week on Sunday, I'm taking a Sunday off. So Reverend Barbara Winter Martin will be speaking for us. And she'll do a recording and it will come to you the same way as usual. Or you can find it on Facebook or on our website at unitynorthmn.org. And we also appreciate your ongoing donations. Thank you so much for your gifts and offerings. And then we hope very soon to either do a Zoom service, have a Zoom virtual service, or a live stream. It takes a little more than we knew doing live streams. So one way or another, that should happen soon within a month. And so we will keep you posted on the timing of that. Stay tuned. So let's begin with our daily word, followed by our lesson today. So just take a deep breath, center yourself, and just hear the word for today. The word is prosperity. I am prosperous as I enjoy my daily blessings. I am comfortable with the person I see in the mirror as I begin my day. I am filled with energy and enthusiasm for my work, my recreation, time with family or friends, or time for learning and reflection. My gratitude grows throughout the day as I take part in activities I enjoy and spend time with people I care about. As I prepare for sleep, I'm grateful for the blessings of a day well lived. More than money or possessions, prosperity is an awareness of well-being, my ability to enjoy simple blessings. I strengthen my prosperity consciousness as I bless and appreciate my home, my friends and family, and my work. I increase the flow of abundance by sharing my time, talents, and treasure in service to others. And from Psalm 23:6, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. And so it is. The talk today is called Divine Protection. A man writes, "This photo is Lexi. She is an 8-week-old German Shepherd. I bought Lexi as a surprise for my wife, but it turns out she's allergic to dogs. So we are now looking to find her a new home. She's 39 years old, a beautiful and caring woman who drives, is a great cook, and keeps a good house." We'll talk about feeling a bit unprotected in your own home, being replaced by a dog. Well, as mentioned, my lesson title today is Divine Protection. You know, it seems the world has gone mad. And yet we are still called to hold the vision that breakdown results in breakthrough, and that amidst it all, we are divinely protected. Yet with all of the news, how do we feel protected in the home that is our country? Hurricanes and floods threaten, fires still rage in California. The coronavirus continues to increase throughout the U.S., not to mention much of the world. We have two political parties divided against each other, and leadership inciting division and violence, a war against the post office and against science and against the environment. We have no financial help from Congress and the president for our economy, for a stimulus package. At the same time, the Supreme Court hangs in the balance with fundamental human rights at stake. What is going on? How does one feel safe with all of this and with the threat to our election? Some of the tragedies going on raise the age-old question about why some die and some survive, and what it all means, and where do faith and divine protection fit in? Well, I'd like to address the unity perspective for a moment, and I've spoken to this before. First of all, unity does not embrace the traditional concept of Armageddon, a final, conclusive battle between the forces of good and evil. We would see that as a metaphor for the evolution and transformation of consciousness within the individual and the collective. Certainly, as more of us wake up, the collective ego raises its head as well. So in one way, we do see this battle or dance playing out before our eyes. We do not agree with mainstream Christianity that in the midst of the chaos, Jesus is going to emerge somewhere above us in the clouds and save us from the destruction that we cause or experience. We teach that the second coming is the personal and collective awakening of Christ consciousness. We are the Savior that we are seeking, the divine within each one of us. And yes, we teach that Jesus, the Christed One, and Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and all those who have gone beyond into the spirit world are available to us for help, as are angels and those departed loved ones working on the other side. There's always the unexpected event that can change everything. It can be a critical mass of enough individuals making a difference. It can be God's grace surprising us. There's always God's grace superseding the law in unexplainable ways. Unity does not teach the concept of a punishing God, but a more probable scenario in unity thought would be our soul chooses its time of birth and death is not a punishment, but part of the natural order of evolution. Perhaps collective death, an entire group of people going out together as those dying from COVID-19 have, is a willing sacrifice agreed upon in advance for something beyond our comprehension. So we have to hold on to that which inspires us. Helen Keller, the great blind and deaf person, once said, "Faith is the strength by which a shattered world shall emerge into the light." She was certainly one to know that truth. Well, I've been thinking of our unity teachings a lot through this time, especially in regard to divine protection. I believe that Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, invoked divine protection for the Unity movement when he chose the symbol of the Unity wings. This symbol was taken from the Egyptian winged solar disk, which symbolizes illumination and divine protection. I took a trip to Egypt in 2011, and those wings are everywhere on the statues and their monuments, and the tour guide speaks of them as being divine protection and illumination. So today we also think of it as the earth being lifted in consciousness on wings of love and prayer. It's interesting, the prayer most associated with the unity movement is the prayer for protection. This prayer that's spoken in most unity churches around the globe every Sunday was written by Unity's poet laureate James Dillett Freeman, born in 1912. He made his transition in April 2003 at the age of 91. Well, his service to the Unity movement spanned more than 70 years. And during that time, he touched every aspect of the Unity work through his contributions. He was known best for his poetry, and 2 of his poems have been actually taken to the moon, a distinction shared by no other poet. The Prayer for Protection, written in 1941, was taken on Apollo 11 in July 1969 by Edwin Aldrin Jr. Aldrin carried the poem with him when he made his historic moonwalk. Then 2 years later, I Am There was taken to the moon by Colonel James Irwin. He left a microfilm copy of the poem on the moon for future space voyagers to find. He actually paid Freeman a visit at Unity Village and brought him a photograph from the moon, and that still hangs in the library at Unity Village, along with a photo of the 2 of them together. Now, both poems emphasize divine protection. And this is a subject that is in the forefront of our minds with the world situation. Our protection has been discussed more than ever before, whether it's protection from violence, from natural disasters, from illness, or from financial ruin. We long to feel safe. We can wonder how divinely protected we would feel if some of the events we see on the news were playing out more directly in our own lives. For some of us, it is. We are all subject to the loss of a loved one, but when some people are saved and others die, when some are healed and some are not, we cannot help but wonder how divine protection fits into those facts of life. How can we stay safe? I'd like to address that question by looking at the prayer for protection. The first line, the light of God surrounds us. This means, to me, that we are completely surrounded and interpenetrated by light, by the quantum field, which is often called the Tao. Einstein once said, the most important question we can ask ourselves is the universe a friendly place? In Unity, we teach there's only one presence and one power in the universe, God the good, omnipotent. In essence, we're saying, yes, it is friendly. The Tao, the light, the force surrounds us, and it is good. We are in God, and God is in us. Like the wave is in the ocean, and the ocean is in the wave. We are one with the divine light present in all of creation. And it's interesting that when we think of protection, we often think of light, whether we imagine surrounding ourselves with a white light or golden or green light. It's a powerful image of God and is often thought of as a remedy for evil or error or unconsciousness. But does it mean it will keep us from death? Well, only death when it's not our time. Since at this stage of evolution, none of us will get out of here alive, at least with our bodies alive. We are protected within the great divine order of life and death, but we are a death-denying culture. So if someone dies in a tragic event, we may tend to believe they were not protected. But that is not ultimately the case. There is also spiritual protection. The second line of the poem is, the love of God enfolds us. This line feels more personal, like being hugged by a parent. Certainly it can be more cosmic, but being enfolded reminds us of an embrace. Sometimes it's helpful to think of God as a benevolent parent. A parent will love his or her children unconditionally and will want them to grow and learn on their own without interfering, except when it's necessary for their safety and well-being. So a child who's learning to walk must fall down and keep trying. And so it is with us as we navigate this school called Earth, which is fraught with many dangers. And sometimes we are hurt. But does that mean that God is not protecting us? No. God is always protecting us, even in the midst of our deepest challenges. I remember one time when my son Justin was about 11 or 12, and he was going to ride his bike over to a friend's house after dinner and spend the night. And I had been having some disturbing dreams about him, and as he drove off, I watched him ride to the end of the block, and just before he turned the corner, I had a feeling of alarm. And I immediately said the prayer for protection for him. And several hours later, I got a call that he'd been in a bike accident and had hurt his head. Well, after a CAT scan and a frightening night in the hospital, he was proclaimed well, and we went home. And I had to ask myself, did the prayer for protection work or not? I mean, if it had worked, would he have had the accident? I choose to believe that it did work, and that things could have been worse. Because praying for protection is invoking grace. It is saying, God, protect me in spite of whatever effects I may have set into motion with the law. Let grace, God's unconditional love, be at work. Let it save me. You know, I never fly on an airplane without saying that prayer. Some may say that's superstitious, but to me it's inviting God's grace in the form of divine protection. To add some extra support, I ask that the plane be carried by angels and set down safely, and then I completely relax. One young man wanted to be protected from failing a test. D. Moore writes, the final exam in electrical engineering worried my son Don. On the last day of class, the professor wished the students luck as he wrote a phone number on the blackboard and said, if any of you have difficulty understanding the review material, just call this number. And he dismissed the class. On Saturday afternoon, stumped by one of the review problems, Don reached for the phone and called the number. He heard a recorded message from Dial a Prayer. Well, the more we align ourselves with that presence of love, the more subject we become to the higher law of grace. The next line is, the power of God protects us. Proverbs 30 says, God is a shield to those who take refuge in him. Scripture also says God is a mother bear, and that means she can be ferocious in her protection. There are many images of God as powerful warrior. I prefer to think of the power of nature. There is that much power and more in the universe to protect and support us. We truly do not have control, and the sooner we recognize that and acknowledge that God is in charge, surrendering to that power, then the easier things become. Then we know we are protected. There was a time in the early 70s when I had experienced recurring tidal wave dreams. And I was moving from Tahoe to the coast, and someone said to me, hey, for someone who has these tidal wave dreams, you're going the wrong direction. And I said, well, the way I figure it is I could spend my whole life in my hometown, Salt Lake City, fearing tidal waves, and go to San Francisco for a weekend, San Francisco or LA for a weekend visit, and die in one. Or I could live in San Francisco or Los Angeles and go home to Salt Lake City for a weekend, and a major earthquake could happen in California while I was away. Well, ironically, that's just what happened about a year later. I was living in Ventura, California at the time, and I went home to Salt Lake City for my mother's birthday. And while I was gone, the San Fernando Valley earthquake struck and destroyed part of the freeway I had traveled, and it closed the Los Angeles airport. I could not fly back for several days to get my car. You know, protection in some ways is in the mind. Certainly we have outer protection. We have a police force, fire department, medical personnel, other caregivers who help to keep us safe, generally speaking. Banks to keep our money secure. Supposedly, locks and alarms to keep our houses free from burglary, self-defense classes and techniques, and on it goes. With all of that, we still want to feel safe, and both physical and spiritual protection can be invoked as we stay aligned with the power of God the power of the Christ presence within. And the next line in the poem is, the presence of God watches over us. Psalm 91, 1 through 11 says, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, who abides in the shadow of the Almighty, will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will give his angels charge of you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. When I think of the presence of God watching over us, I don't just think of a great divine being, but a living consciousness that is ever present, as well as the many aspects of creation that help us: angels, archangels, animal spirits, guides, guardians, ascended masters, humans, and pets. There are so many wonderful stories about the help and protection received from these expressions of God. Some of you may remember the story of Andy Lakey, who in a near-death experience in the 90s was embraced by an angel and told that everything was going to be all right. You know, I mentioned him when I taught the angel class. He returned to this plane a changed man. His vision was sharper. He could see how he had spent his 27 years to that point. He would have felt devastated if it had not been for the sense of utter peace that the angel had left as a sign of God's love for him. He could also remember other incidents where he had received angelic help, not knowing that's what it was at the time. And as Andy's health returned, he began to draw and paint. He left his job, he turned his garage into an art studio, and began to paint. Friends told him he was crazy, but he persisted, and he began to paint angels. And he decided to paint 2,000 angels by the year 2000. This was back in the mid-90s, and he did it. And the first angel he painted in this series now hangs in the Vatican, the second in the Riverside Art Museum, the third belongs to former President Jimmy Carter. Dozens of others have been in the homes of entertainers: Ed Asner, Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles. Others are hanging in hospitals and clinics and even centers for blind people. Blind people can't see artwork, but many of the paintings are three-dimensional so people can feel them. In Unity, we teach angels may be literal, but also metaphorical, so you may prefer to think of them as divine ideas that come to us intuitively. Either way, they represent divine guidance and protection. The presence of God watches over us. And the next line, wherever we are, God is. The universe shivers with wonder in the depths of the human. In Unity, we are panentheistic. That means we believe we are in God and God is in us, as the wave is in the ocean and the ocean is in the wave, yet all one. We have a saying, there is no spot where God is not. And finally, the poem says, wherever we are, God is. And we add, and all is well. When we pray this prayer for protection or any other prayer for the highest good, we can rest in the knowledge that God is in charge. We are divinely protected and all is well. May you know the truth, that the light of God surrounds you, the love of God enfolds you, the power of God protects you, the presence of God watches over you. Wherever you are, God is, and all is well. Despite all outer appearances, we are always divinely protected in God's loving care. God bless you. Have a wonderful week.